I still feel awkward saying go Gators. I've been in Florida now for 2 years. Congratulations to the Bulldogs. I left and the football team got good, so life is not fair sometimes. I was asked to speak about the land grant system and kind of your relationship to it and the future of it. I've been involved in higher level academia for a long time, many years in administration. I've worked at the national side through NIFA, where I led the federal government support of land grant universities. So I've done an awful lot in the system, and I feel like I do have somewhat of a feel for where it is going, or maybe sometimes where it needs to go, and I worry occasionally. But let me go through the history of it, and then talk more about I got it, okay. If you can still turn it up a little bit, please. I want to begin with the history of the land grant system, but then very quickly morph into how what happened in the past will be able to support the future. I think most of you know that the land grant system of universities was started by Abraham Lincoln almost 150 years ago now. Prior to that time, higher education was for what they called, in the South, the landed gentry. In the North, they called it the industrialists. But it was basically people who had a lot of money and a lot of wealth and had extra time on their hands, who were able to sit around and think deep thoughts, history, philosophy, literature, but things that weren't necessarily good for the country. And Abraham Lincoln, several Congress people at that time realized that if our country was going to move forward, we needed universities, not just Harvard and Yale and Princeton, which were teaching philosophy and history and literature, but we needed people to teach agriculture and engineering. And at the time also they included the military arts in that group. And so the land grant system was created. It was initially a research organization. The experiment stations in Georgia, it started in Griffin, Georgia, for example. And they conducted a lot of good applied research, particularly in agriculture. And agriculture in this country owes a lot of its history and success to that early work that happened in the late 1800s, the early 1900s. In the early 1900s, realization that the information wasn't necessarily getting out to the people who needed it as well as possible, so the Extension Service was created. These were county-based programs for people county extension agents, or what I still call them, agents to deliver that information from the home university or from the experiment station out to the people who needed it. And then later on, there was a recognition that African Americans were not part of this great experiment, that they had been left out because of segregation and past slavery. And so the 1890 schools were created. So Fort Valley University in Florida, it would be Florida A&M University. That was created in, 1890, I think. And then the tribal colleges, 1994, tribal nations were left out of agricultural sciences. So we created a whole nother system of tribal colleges. Now, we don't have any tribal colleges here in the Southeast. I think Kansas might be the closest state with the tribal college, but now we have things pretty well covered. The question is, and will be in the future, is the land grant model still relevant for all of you? I said this when I was in Georgia regularly, and I say it in Florida all the time now, that our mission in agriculture, in the land grant, College of Agriculture, IFAS, whatever it might be, is to keep you profitable. If you're not making money, most of you who are farmers in this room have other opportunities. And particularly in Florida, where 1,000 people are moving into the state right now, we're very worried about the future of agriculture because of the pressure on the need for land, especially along the coast. The only way you're going to keep doing what you're doing, you're a business. And we talk about all the good things that agriculture provides to our society, and I'll cover them in a few more minutes, but ultimately it's a business, and if you're not making money, you don't need to be in business. What can we do to lower your input costs? What can we do to increase the quality and quantity of what you produce? What can we do to help you be more sustainable so that what you do has less of an impact without the regulatory burden of the federal and state government coming down on top of you to make you do things that may not be in the best interest of profitability? So those are all things that the land grant system can do for you. And it's something that I hope we do reasonably well for you. There are a couple things that we just naturally do at a land grant school. I'm going to focus and talk about teaching and research, but we do things like 4-H. 4-H is a wonderful program. I'm sure a lot of you went through 4-H, or your children or grandchildren are in 4-H. You know it when you see it. A child who has gone through 4-H has that ability to connect with adults, is more organized, can better public speak. It's a great gift they've been given by the state, by the local, state, and federal government. Master gardening. That's another thing that we do in colleges of agriculture. They're just a natural. It's obviously more for adults, but master gardeners carry that message of lower inputs, better quality, in a different way, typically in home gardens or lawns, but it's just as important because that extends the reach of the land grant mission. So those are things that we always will do that really, frankly, belong in the College of Agriculture. We also teach undergraduates. We teach graduate students, and that's important for two reasons. Number one, for a lot of the businesses in here, you are regularly stealing our staff, our agricultural agents, and moving them into your higher paying jobs. And I say stealing, we're all in the same family and in this together, so I don't say that in a harsh way, but we're the ones who train a lot of the people who have been in this room, who carry that knowledge, who develop the knowledge for your businesses. And without a land grant system, I guarantee you Harvard and Princeton and Yale are not going to be training many people that will be moving into your businesses. Most of the people you hire are the land grant graduates, whether undergraduate, master's, or even PhD. We train undergraduates as our primary mission at any university. It's hard to get into the University of Florida. It's hard to get into the University of Georgia. I could make a joke here about Auburn right now, but I won't do that. I know many of the Auburn graduates in here, but for all these schools, it's hard to get in. I could not have gotten into the University of Georgia as a freshman. I could not have gotten in to the University of Florida as a freshman. Probably could not have gotten into Auburn as well. I was just a very mediocre high school student who didn't really get turned on to the value of education until later in my, I was almost a senior in college by the time I kind of figured out why I was there. I had a good time the first 3 years, but at least the academic side of it was not, at least I thought, the reason why I was in college. But both the University of Georgia, by the way, and the University of Florida, it is so hard to get in. The standards are unbelievable. It's over a 4.0 GPA, it's over a 1300 SAT score. Where these kids come in from that get in as freshmen is beyond me. It's particularly hard to get in under those standards when you are from a rural community where you may not have had a lot of AP classes, you may not have had a lot of SAT prep. The things that you need to do, even really bright kids need to do that if they're going to get in as a freshman. If you don't have a lot of AP classes in your school, you can't get above a 4.0 GPA as a result of that. So you're kind of trapped. But for both Georgia and for Florida and for Auburn, if there are other pathways to get into these universities, you can go to another school for 1 or 2 years, and there are many programs around each of our states that will allow you to do that for a year or two. And I suspect we have some graduates in here who have taken that pathway. In Georgia, at least in the past, before ABAC had 4-year degrees, a lot of the students who graduated with their AA degree from ABAC then transferred to the University of Georgia. It was a great system. That system still exists. I hope that you will tell your children and grandchildren and nieces and nephews that please don't give up. If you want to study agriculture, there are other ways to get into each one of these schools. And even at the University of Florida now, I've started a program where we are getting students from other schools. So Santa Fe College, which is a 2-year school in close to Gainesville, Florida, we're now allowing those students who are freshmen there to be in clubs, be in the Cattlemen's Club or the Cattlewomen's Club at the University of Georgia, participate in our study abroad. All the things that we allow our students to do, these 2-year students can participate in Florida. And they can then, after 1 year, they can transfer if they want to stay for 2 years and get their AA degree, which is sometimes a pretty good idea. They become a full member of the University of Florida or University of Georgia. So please carry that message. I know for a young person who wants to study animal sciences or agronomy or crops and soils, it can seem discouraging that you just can't get into one of these schools. But there are other ways of doing that, and so please carry that message to them. I hate to see students who want to study agriculture. We don't have enough employees in agriculture now. I think we all know that. There was a Purdue study a couple years ago saying schools of agriculture, not included 2- and 4-year schools, were only training 60% of the needed college-educated workforce for the future. This is a huge problem for us in agriculture in the future. We've got to get more students into it. I'm talking to the legislature in Florida about programs that will develop more pathways for students to come in as undergraduates and help offset some of the costs to do that, by the way. Our extension programs are critical. The way we disseminate information is changing. Everyone knows that. We've got media people here in the room today, magazines, radio shows, TV, the internet especially. There are many, many ways of getting the information that you need for your business. So where does that leave Extension? Extension still has an incredibly strong role, and I want to give you a couple examples. Extension is able to walk onto your field with you. You may have a new insect or disease problem. You call your extension agent, they come onto the farm, you walk the field. You can also go into that field with your iPhone now, take a picture of that leaf, and there are a number of programs that will identify that disease or that insect, and it will recommend treatment programs for that particular pest. A lot of that is artificial intelligence driven now, but it's here today, and it's just going to continue to grow. But when an agent is walking a field, or even a crop consultant, as you're walking the field, you may notice that the soil lacks organic matter. In one of the sessions a few minutes ago, we were talking about carbon sequestration, organic matter in soil. You can walk that field, and you can see that there's not enough organic matter in that soil. The AI computer, as smart as it is, and all of the capability that it has, it's only looking at that insect. It's not looking at the other things that can help. Or when a 4-H agent sits down with a child to go over the record book and talk about the process, the organization of it, the presentation, they may be, as they're talking to that child, they may realize that that child is dealing with something else. Personal problem, a problem in school, health problem. AI computer can't do that either. It takes that one-on-one relationship, that person sitting down, the agent sitting down with that child to see that they're dealing with something else that may be far more important than their record book. And without that relationship being built, that child and their problem may be missed. I have a good example here from Georgia, where there was an agent who went into a home to help an elderly couple with financial management. They had become unable to manage their own personal records. They had gotten in touch with a financial extension agent who could help them, doing some training, and they realized at that time that they had nutritional issues. They weren't eating properly. They were losing weight. Health problems were developing from that. An AI computer will never be able to realize that the AI computer can help with their financial management. It can do their tax records, but it's not going to know that that elderly couple was not getting the right food and was developing significant health problems as a result. So extension is important today. It's going to remain important for the future. We will still deliver information. We'll do it differently. We will have handheld AI computers with us on our cell phones here very soon. You actually have it, if you don't already know, through Siri and a few other programs. But it's going to be all over agriculture here sooner rather than later. The third function of the land-grant system is research. And when I was in Georgia, we had lots of discussions about the value of research, who did it, how it was done, how it was funded. So I want to address some of those issues because they continue to linger, and I hear them still in Florida, and I hear them when I was a NIFA director and traveled around the country, I heard the same issues. Many of our problems that we find in agriculture are unresolved. There are new problems, there are new diseases, or new insects coming along all the time, so we will always have a need for research. Industry can do a lot of that research. We don't need to do everything. The land-grant system has a particular niche in the agricultural research domain. So things like really high-risk research, industry can't afford to fail very often. If I was listening to Bill, a couple years ago, I was at a conference and Bill Gates spoke, and Bill said, if you're not failing 70% of the time in his world of research, he said that you're not taking enough risk. You and your businesses, you probably don't think that's a very good idea. You probably think that number is a little too high, but even you recognize that you need to take risks, you need to take chances, and you're going to fail as a result of that sometimes. Now again, 70%'s a little high. You'd probably fire that person who's failing that often. But in academia, we have the freedom to fail more than you do, and so we have the ability to take more risk. And those risky research projects, that's where the real progress comes from. That's where we can move the needle. That's when something that seemed impossible all of a sudden does happen because a university professor took a great risk and made a great discovery as a result. So that's critically important. There's no profit motive in academic research. So again, we're driven by different types of motives. Integrated pest management, that's a technology that came out of universities. Private industry did not pick that up and run with it early on because they did not see the profit potential in releasing insects that would potentially obviate the need to spray as much in that field. Now, industry has finally gotten on board. They've found the ability to use that technology to make money, and so it's been turned over to the private sector, but that never would have happened without the academics at a land-grant university first taking a great risk and finding a way to solve some very intransigent problems that would not have otherwise happened. In Florida right now, I'm dealing with some nutrient management issues. There's the number 1 and 2 industries in Florida, tourism number 1, agriculture number 2, and they're both huge industries. They're locked in a death match right now, cage death match. There is water that is polluted in Florida, whether it's some springs or estuaries. Some people blame agriculture for it. I think we all know that agriculture is a part of that. I don't think it's the biggest part, but we recognize and acknowledge that we need to do our part. Others, Florida's growing very quickly. 1,000 people a day are moving to the States, so more sewage treatment plants, more failing septic tanks, more nutrients getting into water. So it's a very, very complicated situation. But this is, we in the land-grant system, both the University of Florida and Florida A&M, because we have the freedom of being public servants, we can then really jump into this in a very unbiased way. And what we are, and I will give you a heads up of what we're finding because I think this is going to impact a lot of South Georgia too. Our fertilizer recommendations in Florida are too low. The environmental community thinks that and expects that as we reevaluate all of our fertilizer recommendations, they hope to see that these numbers start to go down. And maybe some of them will. But I will tell you, as we have evaluated our recommendations, some of them actually are going to go higher. This is just gonna, that tension between the tourist and or the environmental communities and agriculture is just going to get bigger, and it's going to filter over into South Florida or South Georgia too, as I know some of the recommendations in Georgia ought to be looked at as well. We could not be doing this research if we were not public servants. There's no profit motive. It's very controversial research. It's going to create a lot of angst in Florida when we start to roll out some of these recommendations. The science is the science, the data is the data. It is what it is, and how politicians react to this, how society reacts to this, we'll just have to wait and see. But that's the type of thing, reevaluating soil test recommendations, that pretty much only we at a land-grant university can do. It's very expensive. We got, I hope, about a $8 million per year appropriation with Senator Albritton, a farmer who is the appropriations chair of the Senate in Florida. There's 300, by the way, there's 300 crops in Florida. Probably every one of those needs to be reevaluated for fertilizer rate recommendations. It's going to take many years to get this done, but it can only be done in the land-grant system. You can't really publish this data because it's not very sexy, but for you, this is critically important. If you're applying too little fertilizer, you don't get the yield or the quality you need. If you're applying too much, you're wasting fertilizer, which is really costly now because it's doubled or tripled over the last year. You're wasting money. You can't afford to make mistakes like that. So you need this number right. A land-grant system will help get that number for you. All of this, whether you're in industry, federal government through the Agricultural Research Service, universities, even farmers are doing some of their own research. It is so important right now because we don't have enough food in this world. It's becoming more obvious with the increase in fertilizer prices. You're going to be hearing more and more later on this fall about people going hungry. Not us, but there will be other people on this planet who are going hungry because of what is happening globally right now. We need to produce more food in the Southeast. Georgia, by the way, being the largest state in the Southeast, has a disproportionate burden on herself to produce more food. As the population nears 10 billion, we're not that far away. That's maybe 20 years from now. Some people are thinking it may even go to 11 billion people. Population in Africa is going to double by the year 2050. Africa can't feed herself already. What's going to happen when the population doubles and the food production doesn't? We're going to have to produce a lot more food on this planet, and the only way that is going to happen is with good science and technology. We don't have any more land, and we don't have any more water. They're all finite. We're going to have to double yields, whether it's the growth rate of an animal or a peanut plant. We're going to have to find a way to double yields on the existing land, and that is better use of technology, more use of information, artificial intelligence, all the things that we're just starting to look at now. They're going to be important in 20 years to meet this need. And it's especially important, as I said, in Georgia and in the Southeast for Florida farmers and Alabama farmers and others. A lot of you have probably traveled to the Western recently. They're just running out of water. I've got climatologist friends in California who tell me that this is not a drought that's unusual for them, that the last 100 years in California had been abnormally wet, that agriculture, San Joaquin Valley, Central Valley, it developed in an abnormally wet period of time, but everyone thought that was normal. That's ended, and now they're realizing that they're just going back to the way it was forever. Native Americans chose not to live in the Central Valley of California because it was too hot and too dry. You find Native American populations, Indian populations all over this country, but parts of California were just so miserable that they would not live there. You can't find animals there. That's the way it has always been in California, and apparently we are just going back to the way it used to be. So we're going to take a lot of the West out of the equation for producing more food. You can't produce a lot more food north of the Mason-Dixon line, I guess, would be a good demarcation. It's not warm enough, the days are not long enough, and it gets too cold in the winter, so you can't have multiple crops. What that means is in the United States, it comes down to the southeast. Africa's not going to grow a whole lot more food for a variety of political reasons, at least in the next generation or two. I hope that changes. I lived there for a couple years after I left the dean's job at Georgia, and a lot of change has to happen before they're going to grow more food. The Europeans are not going to grow more food. They got all these goofy environmental things, and it's all organic, and fine for them, but they're not going to feed the rest of the world. South America is actually taking land out of production, putting it back into tropical rainforest for climate protection. Australia has been and always is, will be a big desert. China is becoming having greater desert land in that area. So while their population grows up, it's going to be really hard to grow more food. It's really going to come down to North America and the Southeast in particular. So it's a tremendous burden that this region has placed upon all of you. You got to grow more food. It's a moral obligation. When you can grow food and there are hungry people on this planet, you really need to do it. You're not going to be giving this away, though, by the way. You're going to make money doing all of this as food prices continue to increase, and I'm an advocate for the increase in food prices. You're going to sell this. I think agriculture has a bright future. We have some trade policy in this country that still needs to be worked on. In the last meeting, we were talking about guest workers, how we treat a lot of the specialty crops and our ability to compete with other countries. I still don't think is fair, but if we can get our politics right of this country, and having been in the administration and seen how politics really works sometimes, I do question that sometimes whether we'll ever get it right. But if we can, I think we can take care of agriculture in this region, and we can make sure that we are producing enough food so that we can feed the rest of the world. Now, agriculture is important for lots of reasons. It's not just for growing food. It maintains a quality of life. It protects values of this country. It makes sure that young people are being trained into an industry and as a generation that we can rely on as our future leaders. There's all kinds of good things that come along with that, in addition to all of the ecosystem services that are important for agriculture. And this is something I also want to mention. This is going to be a big part of your future. You heard a lot about carbon sequestration a couple minutes ago. You will be paid for that someday. University of Georgia, working with the University of Florida, we've got a proposal into the USDA right now for $100 million to develop a model system to pay farmers for carbon sequestration. The things that you are already doing or very easily could do, you should not have to do that for free. You protect wildlife, you clean water, clean air, all the things that you have been doing for free. Sometimes we wonder how smart we are as farmers, but we've done a lot for our society for free. And we're getting to the point now where we're saying that's enough. No one else in our society does things for free for the greater good and doesn't expect to be paid for it. So we need to be paid for cleaning the water, cleaning the air, taking carbon out of the atmosphere and locking it up in the soil, wildlife habitat, and the list just goes on and on and on. You need to be paid for that. The past administration, the current administration are both on board with this. It's simply a matter of working out the details of how do you actually do this. It's not that simple. It's not that simple as you increase your organic matter content in soil by 1%, so we need to value that through a carbon credit and give you that money. Doesn't quite work as simply as that, but that is a concept. So ecosystem services, that's going to become a big part of your future and your family members' future. So it's a great industry. You're feeding the world, you're protecting the environment. How many people can go home from work every day and say that you did those two things? It's a blessing that you have to be in your position to have your jobs. I have a couple other little details that I want to finish up with, because these are things I heard a lot about in Georgia. Occasionally we fought about these things. Hear about them in Florida today, and so I just want to cover a couple of these. And so please, it's in random order here, so bear with me. Working in other countries and training foreign students. The question always was, so in the Midwest it was, why are you teaching people, if you were from Illinois, for example, why are you teaching people in China how to grow soybeans? It seems like you're just creating a competitive market for us. There is a little bit to that, by the way, but we no longer live in a society where all the answers are found in the United States. There are good universities in Africa. There are good universities in China. China now spends more on agricultural research than the United States does. That's a shocking number to me, but they have significantly enhanced their agricultural research program, and they're going to be the ones coming out with many more new ideas and intellectual properties, plant varieties, than us here in this country. I think we need to turn that around, and I know the administration is looking at that carefully, but that's a serious threat. It's one of the threats to our businesses is competition with China. But the Chinese have answers that we need. HLB, which is devastated, it's taken out 2/3 citrus production in Florida. It started in China, another disease that came from China. Started in China. They've been studying this for years now. They've got a lot of good information that will help us in this state find answers to this. And by the way, Georgia and Alabama are now growing cold hardy citrus, more so in Georgia than in Florida right now, for satsumas at least. So this is going to become an issue for a number of other states as well. So we need those ideas. We need those students. We need their intellectual property. They come here, they stay. That's great for us. It's a loss for their country, but because we have better opportunity to actually capitalize on your ideas in this country. You know, when you're in a communist country and you come up with a good idea, then everyone owns it. You can't make any money off of it. They want to come here, capitalize their ideas, make some money. That's how ideas infuse into the market system, is through capitalism. And so we've got that. Others don't. We're going to continue to see people want to move here because this is where the capacity exists to work freely and to benefit from those ideas that you have developed. IDC overhead. Don and I talked about this one a lot. There is a cost of doing research at a university. When you go to a private company to get research done, they charge you the full cost of that research, and usually there's some profit built into that. University doesn't do that because we have a lot of our costs covered mostly through your tax dollars already. But we are not fully funded at a university. None of these universities, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi State, South Carolina, none of them are fully funded. So there is a need to bring in some money. There are true overhead costs associated with research. We can argue about, is it 5%, is it 10%, is it 20%? But there are some true costs to this. And so there are several groups in here that fund research. As you think about that, just remember that universities, we have burden on us from higher ups, from the president and provosts who are really money focused. And there are true costs that they are asking to be paid for. And some schools now, and even at Florida, I've had to grant a couple waivers to not pay overhead to industry or commodity groups. But what we did is I just ate that money out of my own budget. So I was essentially subsidizing that industry by paying their overhead since they didn't want to pay it. But the research was just critically important, and we couldn't, for our farmers, it had to be done. And so I hope we all can continue to have this discussion about indirect. It's not something you think about every day, but it does impact our ability to do work. And the last one I just want to finish up with, because it irritates everyone in this room. How many I know we got a couple faculty in here, a couple, Seedbaum Kemeroid around, and Scott Tubbs, he was here earlier. Anyway, they're tenured. Tenure irritates people to no end because it's a job for life. That's true. It is a job for life, if you want it to be. But here's a couple other things that have changed. We now have post-tenure review, so if someone actually wants to retire in place, we have ways of getting rid of them. Georgia has gotten really good at getting rid of faculty that they don't want. Hopefully in Florida we'll be able to do that more in the future. But once you become tenured, that really frees you up to do a lot of things. You can then work on things that will impact you. The fertilizer rate recommendations, as I said, you can't publish that work anywhere. You're not going to get academic credit for that, but that's incredibly important for you, so that you can maximize your yields without over fertilizing and wasting money. A tenured professor needs to do that type of work. It can't really be assigned to a untenured professor because they're still publishing and they're still perishing if they don't do that. And they think about federal grants to support their research through the organization that I used to run. But once you have tenure, that frees you up to do more risky research, to do research that may not have that profit motive associated with it, but may be the critical piece of knowledge that helps keep you in business. So while I understand the problems with tenure, realize that we in academia know that, we hear you, we're trying to find ways to make sure that it's not a job for life, so that if someone is not being impactful, we can get rid of them and move them on to other places. Anyway, so thanks for your time today. It's been great being back here in Georgia and at this meeting. Got lots of close friends here, and it's a pleasure to see you all, and love to come back more to this. So appreciate the invitation. Thank you.